buddy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Offshore-Live. I'm your host, Rick Cowell, and I hope everybody had a good weekend. It's a pleasure to be back with you. And as you can see, sitting right here beside me is none other than Coach Steve Logan. And Coach Logan, it's a pleasure to have you on board, sir.
Well, as you know, I'm here because of the producer of this show. My good friend, Captain Brian, has taught me more about inshore fishing over the last 6, 8, 10 years since we've bumped into each other, and it really is a pleasure to be here, and this is a lot of fun.
Well, it is, and let's start if we can with any of your offshore experiences. Do you have any? Do you fish offshore at all, or?
Well, over the years, I have been invited on a lot of boats, and once upon a time, this is really and truly the last time I went offshore. Well, this is the second to the last time I went offshore, and this is a true war story.
Okay.
I got invited onto a commercial boat. It was a bluefin tuna. They had one of those tags, right?
Yeah.
We pulled out of this inlet at 8 a.m. and at noon, precisely at noon, we weren't more than, they were going really, really slow, and I'm just there watching. We got hooked up I take that back, we got hooked up at 8 o'clock. We had just cleared the inlet, and we got hooked up at 8 o'clock. Well, they put me in charge of the captain's chair to keep this guy lined up, right?
Yeah.
And this poor guy, we start battling this fish, and this is a true story, every bit of it, at 8 a.m. At noon, 4 hours later, they decided that the equipment was not going to take it anymore. And so they decided they were going to bring this fish in green. And we had never seen the fish. All I kept seeing was we'd get it kind of close, and then that thing would take off to China again. And then we'd reel it and back down and do all this. This went on for 4 hours.
Jeez.
At noon, they decided to bring it in no matter what. Well, we finally get this. They told me, now look, I'm a rookie.
Okay.
These are commercial guys. They said they estimated that fish around 700 pounds. Which, if you've watched, what do they call it, wicked tuna, you know that those are normally 400 and 500 pound fish at the best.
Right, yes.
So this sea monster came up to the side of the boat. Now here's the rest of the story. I didn't know anything about bluefin tuna, but what they want to ideally do is gaff them in the eye. Because they don't want to bloody the meat.
Right, yeah,
These fish end up on the dock.
They're so valuable.
Yeah, they end up in Japan that night because it's a Japanese delicacy, I understand.
Yeah.
It's real bloody meat. So anyway, I'm watching all this, and they pull this monster up that is almost the length of our boat.
Wow.
This guy gaffed this fish in the eye. Now, here's what I want to tell you.
Okay.
It really pissed that fish off. I mean, there was an explosion. That fish came straight up in the air. It almost came in the boat. And I mean, I'm in a back pedal. I'm going to the front of the boat as fast as I can. I mean, I'm literally scared to death.
Yeah. Ooh.
That fish came down. It knocked the boat around, and of course, it broke off. And that was the end of that.
Oh.
So there was dead silence on the boat for a long, because these guys, these were commercial guys.
Right, yeah, they're making their money.
And so finally, they were getting all their stuff and trying to get everything reorganized, and they were going to go ahead and turn right back and come in because that was it for the day. And they got out, finally, they settled down a little bit, and they got out their Jim Beam and their Jack Daniels, and they were taking a sip. And finally, when they calmed down and I knew they had kind of regathered themselves, I told them, I said, now, let me tell you guys something. You better be damn glad that you weren't a football coach and you had a call-in show at the end of that, because every goofball in the world would have called in and said, why'd you do this, why'd you do that, how come you did it?
Right.
Okay. And they finally loosened up and had a good laugh over that, but they were about half lit before they could laugh.
That was a good analogy, though. I mean,
but
something
it really
to break the ice a little bit.
But my God, but here, the other thing that happened, I was guiding that chair for 4 hours, literally. At the end of that, when they finally decided to back down, all the way down on the fish, that guy fell out of that chair, and he went into a full body cramp. He was in a fetal position. Man. He couldn't move. I mean, it was the most crazy thing I'd ever witnessed in my life, and that was kind of about the last time I've been out on a big boat.
Wow.
But
well,
that's a good enough story
a
to end on.
700-pound fish, that's like bringing in a big marlin.
Well,
you know.
Listen, it was a sea monster, and like I say, those guys, they were telling me all about how much money it would have been, and
man,
all
yeah.
those guys on that boat that did this for a living said they had never seen a bluefin that big.
And you laid your eyes on it.
I laid my eyes on it, and I was in a back pedal when I did it.
Because you thought he was going to come over the rail.
Listen, I'm telling you, he almost did, but it
Wow.
was really quite a story. But these guys that go out and do this with that big equipment like that, I mean, and if you ever, it's like any professional sport. I tell people all the time, if you came, let's say, to a regular practice in the NFL, and just came to the football field where I made my living and watched NFL players practice, it would blow your mind at the explosive intensity, the danger of every snap. And that's the same way with me. I'm a rookie. When I go out on a boat like that, I really don't even know what I'm watching.
Right.
But I understand real quick that the danger element
Yeah.
is for real.
Highly elevated, is it not?
Yeah, you don't screw around out there, but
You sure don't.
it's an amazing sport, and I'm really glad I didn't ever get hooked on it because I can't afford it. I know
Right,
that.
yeah, yes, understood. Now, of course, you and I have some experience inshore fishing
That's where I fell in love right there.
with Captain Brian Goodwin.
Right.
And I guess it's been a couple of times we've gone out.
Yeah.
Maybe even did a little filming.
A little bit, yeah.
Well,
Brian,
we did more catching.
we did more catch. Brian put me on to,
Here's some footage
yeah.
right here. Let's take a look
well,
at
this might be, Brian put me onto these giant redfish.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, you're talking, I guess we landed some that were 35 and 40 pound. And boy, what a see, I was raised in Oklahoma, so I was raised bass fishing. And I did a lot of it. I mean, I know how to fish. And then I got over here to the Carolinas and found out that, you know, catching a 6 and 8 pound bass is exciting, but
Yes.
all of a sudden I was catching 10 pound redfish routinely.
Sure.
And well,
Yeah.
I got hooked on that, and then of course Brian really ruined my life. He took me out and
Yes.
started putting me on these 30, 35 pounders.
That's right. This is out in the Neuse River,
Yep.
basically, where it meets up with the Pamlico
Yeah,
Sound.
Brian's
somewhere
got
in there.
he's got them marked out there, and
yeah, he's got his spots marked
it
out.
was just this is if you've never done this, you need to do it.
It's
because
quite a fun fishery. You'll notice it's the sun's starting to go down a little bit. It's a golden hour for photographers, isn't it?
Yeah, but
little
Brian
bit windy.
Brian will put you on a fish now, and he's got these places marked, and it's
As you can see, there's not a whole lot around in the horizon, which is, so means you
No.
gotta have those places marked. Or are you just going to drive right past them?
well, he's got them marked because we go 5. I always kid Brian. I've often thought about the way I may die, and but I never thought I'd die going 700 miles an hour in his boat in 2 feet of water.
That's right. Yeah, man.
So-
that is a little bit scary. That's a holding on kind of
Yeah.
time, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've done that with him several times. But we go out and we drop down on these big redfish, and it has become my single favorite fish to chase and to catch. And they're magic. They are absolutely magic.
I mean, pound for pound.
Can't beat it.
I can't think of a fish that maybe a snook.
I've
Have you ever caught a snook?
Well, you see my Buccaneer shirt on when I was
that's
down in
right.
Florida, and I was working for Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Of course, the first thing I always do when I get to town, everybody, you know, the heck with that. I'm finding out who the pro fishermen are, and I call them.
Right.
Well, I called this guy, and sure enough, one thing leads to another, and he put me on some snook. And they say that, you know, the snook is a special fish to catch, and it is. They come break water like the tarpon do.
Sure, exactly
And,
right.
but you know, the tarpon, the snook, and the redfish, those are my 3, you know, go-to species.
And if you meet up with a fella and he says he's caught a bunch of snook, you better check his thumb and see if it's
yeah,
all
it'll be all raw.
sandpapered out.
It'll be
raw.
sandpapered out
That's
because
exactly
you
right.
can lip them if they're not too big. But,
Right.
But I got on the snook one day with that guy, and we had an absolute ball. But the thing about the redfish that's curious, it was curious to me as a bass fisherman.
Yeah.
You approach redfish almost exactly like you do a bass.
You're right. You're fishing on the bottom down there.
You're working lures exactly the same way. You're looking for structure a lot in a lot of the same ways, and they'll hit many of the same lures that a bass will hit. You know, from top water all the way down, you know, to the jigs and the flukes and those kinds of things. So it was a it was a real familiar fishery to me, even though I'd never done it before. But I've fallen in love with it. It's my favorite thing to do.
So we're out there looking for kind of a rocky bottom, essentially, and we're not real deep.
Nope.
Probably about 13 feet of water or so.
Now this particular idea where these are what Brian told me, these are called the breeders that are coming in. So, you know, this is live bait that we had dropped out to the bottom, but a lot of times we, you know, with Brian, I'll go fishing and everything is artificial, which...
Right, and you just sight cast in.
Yeah, much like bass fishing. So I'm familiar.
Are you going to
with
get this fish in anytime
Probably
soon?
not. It'll probably whip my ass, as you can see right here.
I mean, honestly, though, that is a
That's what
medium
happens.
heavy rod, and look at it bent over.
Yeah, but that's what happens.
I know you guys can't see it out in the audience. I apologize for that. I'll give you a special viewing later.
But you're talking about a, 15, 20-minute fight on almost every one of them.
That's exactly right.
And it's a chore to get them in, and then of course you release all of them, and it's exciting. It is really exciting.
I remember one time where we put the boat in down the South River that this fellow was saying that when he was younger, that he would walk down that dock and there'd be 30 of them, every one of them that big, laid out side by side by side.
Yeah.
I'm glad we don't do that anymore. I'm glad we throw them back, frankly.
Yeah.
But once we get a view of this fish, then people will understand why it took you so long. I say so long. You're right. It's a 15 or 20 minute fight.
It's a 15, 20-minute fight most of the time, and that was not one of the bigger ones that we landed that night. I know that I think I've done this 3 times with Brian, and the first time we ever went out, the very first one I hooked, I've got a picture of it on my phone. It was a 35, 40-pound fish.
And what's interesting is, now again, this is daylight, and we're going to fish right on into the night.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah. Magic.
Because that's when when the real magic starts.
That's a healthy fish right there.
Yeah, it is. Let's see.
That's bigger than the bass that I used to catch in Oklahoma. I promise you that.
I guess it is.
Yes, it is. That's a beautiful
there we
fish,
go.
isn't it?
Look at there. Look at that spot. Couple of spots on that fish. Very nice. Brian's explaining that to us now.
Brian took my 2 boys. We've kind of made a yearly thing with my 2 boys. They're 38 and 36 years old now. And my oldest son is kind of a big fisherman. The youngest one never did really get that hooked on it, but he can fish.
Right.
But we took him out, and we were talking. We caught some redfish just last fall, and so they're redfish, they're drum, they're
red drum.
Channel bass.
Channel bass, yeah.
How many names they got, right?
I think we've just about probably covered them all.
But, when I first got down here, I would hear all these names, and I thought, my God, there's...
Puppy drum.
And it took me a long time to assimilate that's all the same fish.
Right,
So that's
and
being a rookie.
I'll tell you, they are usually around this time of the year.
Yeah.
And then, of course, later in the fall.
Well, that's when it's going.
And that's when it's really, when it's really going on.
I'll tell you the other story, Brian. We went out. I think one hurricane came through and rearranged what he calls Shark Island.
Oh yes.
So we went out there, and it had created kind of a pool, and we began to catch 10 and 15-pound redfish. Literally, with just my oldest son made that trip. We caught them cast after cast after cast for 5 and 6 straight hours, and I got home that night, and I've played football my entire life. I've been injured terribly, and I got home and I told my son, I'll be damned, I got to take Advil from fishing. I'm not kidding you, my right forearm was shredded.
I believe
and I was in rehab for a week from fishing.
That was after Hurricane Matthew had come through, and that island that you're talking about is literally 9 miles outside the Beaufort Inlet. But once you get there, you would never believe it.
No. Like you're on the edge of the world.
It was almost the size of a football field, that water that was in there, as I recall.
It just made kind of a big pool.
It did.
A big inlet, and those fish were stacked in there. It was really the most unbelievable day of fishing I've ever had.
In fact, we've caught some fish out of there that had been tagged up in Virginia.
Really?
So they're, we believe, making their way down and through. Well, that's interesting.
Yep. Fishing with Captain Brian. I got a million stories,
I'll
man.
bet you do. Yeah. Where to begin? Now, you mentioned your son, both of your sons.
Right.
And I know that one of your sons has something pretty special going on tomorrow. Let's talk about that.
Well, both my boys played college baseball. My youngest son, Nate, pitched at Campbell and had a great career. And, well, he is now the head baseball coach at Middle Creek High School, which is a South Raleigh baseball factory. There's 8 or 10 schools down there, and the baseball they play, well, for instance, on my son's starting 9, I think 5 of those young men already have money for college. Playing, you see what I'm saying? I mean,
yes,
and well, that's the good news. The bad news is all the teams he plays have the same roster.
Wow.
I mean,
it's they're that good.
Big time high school baseball. And the other night they had a playoff game that they had to win to get into the playoffs. And in Holly Springs they built a minor league baseball park. It's called Salamander Park, and it's a beautiful facility. And so they moved the game to there and had a great big-time field. Well, in the bottom of the 6th inning, they play 7-inning games in high school baseball. In the bottom of the 6th, Nate's catcher, my son's catcher, launched a 360-foot 2-run homer to win it.
Wow.
And so that put him in the playoffs. So tomorrow night is the first round of the playoffs.
And who are they playing?
They're playing Millbrook up in kind of midtown Raleigh.
Yeah, Millbrook.
Yeah, Millbrook High School. And so I got to go back for that. And I used to get sick about going to my football games and calling my games, and now I get double sick watching him coach. So it's worse, I promise you.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
How about your other son? What's he up to?
Well, my other son, my oldest boy, he was kind of like his daddy. He was stupid, and he got involved with football. And so I got him a job. He was a director of football operations at a couple of Division I universities. And that job it's like coaching. It's 24/7, 365, and anything that goes wrong is your fault because you're in charge of the operations of the program. So all of the travel, everything.
Sure.
So he did that, and he got a little bit burnt out with it, which you can do in coaching. And he got a job with R.J. Reynolds, and he lives in Manio.
Oh, wow.
And it was really curious because he's got a great job with a Fortune 500 company. And so he told me, he said, Dad, I got to make my rounds up in Northeast North Carolina every day and make my rounds, make sure the product is this. He doesn't have an office, nobody, he just, his car. And he said, and he runs his route on his own time. And so every time I call him, he's in his kayak fishing. And so, but it was curious. At the end of about 6 months of that job, I said, Vince, how are you liking that job? And he said, Dad, this is like not working.
Oh my goodness!
But
don't tell anybody.
Well,
you know.
No, but it's true from the standpoint of when you do enter the coaching world. You know, I mean, that picture you showed a minute ago kind of made my stomach flip. You know, I got a Buccaneer jersey on. Well, you go to work at 6 in the morning, and at midnight you walk out the door. And 5.5 hours later, in the front door. It's just such a Groundhog Day existence, and that goes on in the NFL. That goes on 11 months a year. You get 1 month off, but when you get into that, it's kind of like you don't realize how much of a grind it is until you step away from it.
And you put a lot of pressure on yourself as well, as well as external pressures, I'm sure.
That's the difference. I tell people, like, for instance, if I was running this restaurant, there's a lot of pressure. You got to get things right, and you can't have a screw up, and you got to hire staff, blah, 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 blah. The difference is, if something does go wrong here, as I mentioned earlier, there's not a call-in show
That's
to
right.
bitch about how the French fries were made that night.
True that, yes.
From people that don't have the first clue
about
how to cook a French fry.
Uh-huh.
So, and that is what grinds on you in the coaching.
Sure.
It's the same, but you get the added element of
that constant
grind. It's just
and then from the press and whomever else decides to take a shot or two.
I'll tell you what my daddy told me one time.
Yeah.
I called him one night. He was a great country philosopher. And we got beat. I'll never forget. We got beat by West Virginia on the last play of the game. And I called him. I'd call him after every game. And I called him. I said, Dad, and I was singing the blues and everything. He said, son, let me tell you something. He said, there's two things that men think they know everything about sex and football. And he said, they don't know one damn thing about one of them and ain't worth a at the other. And he said, you can put that in either order. So I hung the phone up and I thought, he's probably right.
He's a very astute individual, wasn't he?
I'll tell you what, when the crap was hitting the fan, I could call my dad, and he really had of course, you know, when you fight World War II and you're in a jungle fighting for your life, losing to West Virginia is not that big a deal.
Puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
It really does, but he had a way of doing that.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
What else is going on with you? Tell me, obviously, most people in Eastern North Carolina know you from your days at ECU. Do you relive those years from time to time in your head, or have you just moved on from that? Or
no, people's perception of a coach's journey is totally different than the journey. Because when you're coaching, it's just third down and 6. I mean, it's third down and 6 where I happen to be working. I did happen to work at East Carolina for about 15 years. But from there, you know, I went into NFL Europe because I was really attracted to the developmental of the developmental
yes,
league.
I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, I was in Berlin for 3 years and I loved
How
Europe.
was that? What was living in Berlin like?
Berlin, I mean, the first thing I would tell you is that people that bitch about America, you need to put them on a boat to anywhere.
There you go.
And have them
I hear
spend
you.
about 1 month, and they'll come back and they'll quit their bitching pretty quick, because Western Europe is the closest thing there is to America, and it's not even a close second.
Wow.
Now, just think about that for a minute. But I loved it over there. It was an extraordinary experience, and I loved working with the NFL football players. But I went over there and did that for 3 years, and then came back and I took a job at Boston College, and ran the offense there for 2 years. And I went to Tampa Bay, and then I went to San Francisco, and then I was working in the Alliance of American Football, which was a spring league 3 years ago, and it ran into money problems and folded up. And I was just last year, I was getting ready to go to work in the XFL.
Oh, yeah.
With down in Dallas, and this COVID insanity hit and ruined everything. So I'm just they're going to start the XFL up probably again in another year or two.
So that's kind of a developmental league
It
as well, isn't it?
And that's exactly where I want to work right now. I don't have enough juice to go back and do all that other stuff again. But working with the developmental kids is really, they're extraordinarily talented, and they're fun to work with. And
they listen?
Let me tell you what, they don't have those big fat contracts yet, and boy, do they listen.
Yeah, that's what
I'm
thinking.
They really listen, and it's the best sweet spot to coach is developmental football.
Well, it sounds like you're well on your way. I mean, what's it like to just up and move for 3 years? I mean, for your family and such. I mean, obviously your kids are older now, but
yeah, from when I broke into coaching in 1975, by the time we left East Carolina, we had moved 22 times.
Wow.
Because what happens in the coaching profession, at the end of 2 years, you've not won enough games, therefore you're fired. Or at the end of 2 years, you've won an extraordinary number of games, therefore you're getting a better offer and you got to go. So staying, you know, the length of time I stayed in Greenville was extraordinary. And I stayed there. I turned down a lot of money and a lot of attractive
offers,
jobs because my family and my boys, particularly my 2 boys, they were ingrained in the baseball culture. They were having a great amount of success, and I didn't want to interrupt that. But once we left Greenville, I began to do a lot of media, and I took a break from coaching. And so I thought, well, you know what, I could be happy doing the media. So my wife and I, we bought a townhome in Raleigh, right next to the airport, so I could get in and out. Well, about that time is when the NFL Europe called, and I started my second journey. NFL Europe, Boston, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, Birmingham in the AAF. But what we do, we have our home, townhome, and when San Francisco 49ers call, we just lock the door, get on a plane, and I go to San Francisco and rent an apartment, buy a couch, 2 flat screen TVs and a bed, wait to get fired and come back home. And every place I've left, I give away 2 flat screen TVs, a couch, and a great bed. Somebody gets lucky every time I leave.
Man, you gotta love that.
But you got to have a system.
That sounds like you've got yours down pretty damn good.
Because, you get fired and we get on a jet and come back home, unlock the town home, walk in.
Welcome back, honey.
Welcome back. I'm back. So, but that's the way you do it. And we went to Europe for 3 years, went to Boston for 2 years, Tampa Bay for 3, San Francisco for 2, and
Well, you derive as much good out of that stuff as you can, I imagine, for every place you go.
Yeah, you do. I've loved every place I've been.
There
every single one of them. I've had a ball everywhere.
Good.
So there you go.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's go to a quick break, and then we'll be right back. All righty, we're back. And with me is Coach Steve Logan. Coach, thank you again so much for coming in. I always enjoy hanging out with you, regardless of what Brian says. But so let's switch gears a minute. Do you have any insights for us on ACC football maybe this year, or this season?
I haven't I'm not as intimate with it as I normally would be. I was doing a radio show, as you probably are aware.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I did. I had a really fun radio show on Saturday mornings in Raleigh for really several years, and I just kind of unplugged that over the last 2 years. I kind of miss it in a way, but anyway. I was really stayed on top of the ACC, NFL, all that stuff, Panther football, all the local stuff. But, just casually watching, the ACC, I'm a quarterback guy. I spent my life teaching quarterbacks, and so my eye is always, that's where I start. Well, Mac Brown has captured an NFL quarterback over at Chapel Hill, which is going to give them a chance to be a pretty competitive team, which they have been. With this, I don't even remember the young man's name. I'm sure everybody would know it but me, but I know that he's a quality player. Sam Howell. That's exactly right. He's got an NFL arm. He's an NFL type kid, and so consequently, guess what? Chapel Hill's a pretty good football team, and so those programs, all programs, to be honest with you, rise and fall with the quarterback.
I was going to say, so if you took him and put him at Wake Forest
be ready to go.
Wow.
Right now.
Isn't that incredible?
It's that dramatic. It's like a pitcher in baseball. But, the quarterback position, especially the way the game is built today, back in the 70s and maybe some wishbone football in the 70s and I formation.
Right.
You could get by with Bo Jackson at tailback and you didn't even know the quarterback's name.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a different game now. So everything emanates out of the quarterback hand. And so like Trevor Lawrence, the kid that just left Clemson, well, I'm sure Clemson has, a quality guy, but he's not going to be quite as experienced.
He's not Trevor
obviously.
Lawrence.
He's probably not going to be Trevor. He could be.
And he went to Trevor Lawrence. Where did he end
Jacksonville
up?
Jaguars, first pick of the draft.
How do you see his future?
Well, I tell people this all the time. It's true at every level, but at the National Football League level, the journey of a quarterback is so precarious from the standpoint of what kind of system are you going to be in? How good is the talent on your team? Now, and so let's think about that for a minute. Well, Trevor Lawrence was the first pick of the draft. That means the Jacksonville Jaguars are perfectly awful.
Right. They got the first draft for a reason.
Well,
right.
guess what? Now, guess what?
Pick.
Trevor Lawrence is the first round pick. He's got to go on the field right now.
Yeah.
So he's going to be playing. The analogy would be trying to hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, whereas for the last 3 years at Clemson, he's been hitting 85-mile-an-hour fastballs. Because the difference in college and pro football is exponential.
Speed,
violence,
everything.
Intellect, emotions, everything is ramped up times 10. So the point I'm making is, who was the really good quarterback from LSU that went to the Cincinnati Bengals just a year ago? Having a great year with the Bengals. Guess what? Tore his knee up. Why? Because he had already been hit 66 times by the time he finally got his knee torn up.
Oh, man.
And so I'm just saying, you say, well, how good's he going to be? Well, what you really want to do, for instance, I always refer to, let's say,
Chris Burrows. That's that guy's name.
Chris Burrows. Well, think about a guy like Dak Prescott. Well, he's a fourth-round pick. And he gets to go where? To the Dallas Cowboys, which are never awful.
Right.
They're always pretty well stocked. Not only that, he gets to sit on the bench for a year and a half behind Tony Romo.
Right.
And then Tony breaks his back. Okay, Dak, come on in. And they're just amazed at how quickly he acclimated to the game, and he's a great player. So I've often said, it's almost better to be a fourth-round Dak Prescott than it is a first-round Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Because of all of those competing agendas that are at work in your life as a quarterback.
Sure.
Who's on your team? How stable is the franchise? Will you have the luxury of maybe sitting on the bench for a year, which in the old days you always did?
Right, yeah.
In this day and age, Trevor Lawrence will start the very first game. And he might be great, but the chances are it'll be a car wreck. Because I've been there. I've coached quarterbacks in the National Football League, and I never had a rookie. When I was at Tampa Bay, we brought in Josh Freeman, who was a rookie. And I wasn't the quarterback coach at Tampa Bay. I was running back coach. But I watched Josh go through it. And the first year he was our starter, we went 3-13.
Ouch.
And it was painful for everybody involved. And then the next year, they acclimate, and he became what we hoped he would become. He was a really solid NFL quarterback. But so anyway, there's you can't just look at I make the analogy all the time. Give me a 95-mile-an-hour college pitcher. You can take him into the major leagues, and he will survive. Now, he's going to get knocked around, even though he's throwing 95. But he'll survive much more easily than the quarterback analogy will, because the pitcher's the pitcher. He's not relying upon somebody that's got to protect him before he throws the ball.
Right, that's true.
He knows the catcher's going to catch the ball when he throws it. Trevor Lawrence might be throwing to a free agent wide receiver that couldn't catch a cold if he's naked in the Klondike. But he's starting.
Right. Somehow he got that position.
He got that position because it's a down. The franchise is down. They don't have it built properly yet. And so all of the things that affect a quarterback's journey are not the same for a pro pitcher. For all the sports are different.
Very interesting.
There you
That's
go.
a really, really good insight.
I should have my radio show back.
You should. I remember, because I've got family up that way. And whenever I'd ride up there, I'd listen to you. I can't even remember if I called in or not. I might have been one of those 3rd and 6th guys.
Well, you should have called in and bitch about something.
I probably did, just under a pseudonym.
What it was, we had, I'm a big blues guy. As you know, you're a musician, and I'm a terrible, terrible musician, but I love the blues. But I'd bring my blues collection in, and that would be my bumper music.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'd have a little football, and then we would also we would discuss the red wine selection of the day.
That was going to be my next burning question.
That's priority.
Okay, because I know you like red wine, and I'm thinking to myself, let's say I went out and got some triggerfish at the Blue Ocean Market.
I'm with you.
And brought it in. What would you recommend? Because everybody's always going to say white wine, of course.
Right. And
is there a red wine that would qualify?
A Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir is it's the one red wine, not the one, but it's the go-to red wine for any fish. In fact, just tonight, I had a dynamite grouper just before I came here.
Oh, okay.
And I matched it with a Bowen Pinot Noir. It's fabulous. I am, even though I'm a redneck, I am a big-time food snob.
You are. I was going to say you're just a wine connoisseur, though. I mean, in general terms, wouldn't you consider yourself kind of on the edge?
I'm on the edge because I experiment with it a lot. I search them out. I drink a lot of different bottles. I don't drink a lot of wine. I do drink one glass every single night. I do that.
Well,
but
keeps you healthy.
It does. It does. But it's the only habit I've got that has some health benefit to it.
There you go. Perfect. Well, let's see. So from the audience, by the way, and let me go back up just a minute, from having lived in Europe, you didn't do any fishing in Europe, or you did?
We didn't really have time, you're coaching. But it was interesting because my 3rd year, I was in Cologne, Germany, which is where the Rhine River, okay? So I would go to dinner every night and sit out on the river, and I would watch these guys, and the species of fish over there are totally different. I mean, just fish that I'd never really... And I never really got close enough to figure out what it was they were fishing for or catching. But it's not the species of fish that we're used to in this part of the world. It's just...
Isn't that interesting? I never would have thought about that.
It is. It's different fish over there. But I would watch them with great interest, but I never had time.
Well, I wonder what in the hell they're serving with fish and chips over there in Europe.
I can answer that.
What's that? What?
In Germany, it's beer. Okay, the beer, I'm not a beer drinker at all. How sad that I was in Germany. But anyway, in Germany, it's just like you see in cartoons, giant steins. Yeah. And the beer in Europe is 14% alcohol. Now think about that.
Whoa, that got some applause from the audience.
Well, a can of beer here is what, 3%? 3%?
Yes,
alcohol, right?
I guess. It's 3, 5.
And what are they over here? What is a malt liquor, which is a heavy beer here, is like 6, 8%?
Yes.
The regular beer that they serve and drink routinely in Germany is 14% alcohol. And
Moses.
But anyway,
that's amazing.
That's what the Germans
drink. And then I also
drink.
heard that they drink it room temperature.
They do. In fact, here's the first phrase of German that I made myself learn.
Yeah.
I would say, eine Diet Coke mit viele Eiswürfel. That means I want a Diet Coke with a lot of ice. Then, because routinely they would bring you a Diet Coke with no ice, room temperature, and I'd say Eiswürfel, which is ice. Okay, they would bring me 1 cube. I'd go, viele means a lot. So I learned that phrase. So ein Diet Coke mit viele Eiswürfel, and so just so I could get a Diet Coke with some ice.
I don't know why that just tickled me.
It's
but
just
it's
a different.
Funny.
Like I say, people that bitch about America, 1 month out, come back, and you go anywhere you want to go.
Right. Sure.
You come back, and you won't be bitching about America ever again, because
I'm digging that.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's the way it is. But again, I loved Europe. I had a ball over there. And in Germany, as I said, I'm a food snob. So German food,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
What do
yeah,
you think
yeah.
of potatoes, right?
Yes.
Well, that's true. So I learned very quickly that the best German restaurant in Berlin is the nearest Italian restaurant. So I ate Italian every night.
I hear you. Hey, you guys, that was a heck of a show, wasn't it? We appreciate you, everybody being involved with Offshore-Live, and especially to Coach Steve Logan.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you so much,
Yeah,
Coach.
thanks for having me.
I'll tell you
A lot
what, we
of fun.
started with the firepower right off the bat. It's all going to be downhill from here. But thank you so much for taking the time to come in. I know you did this as a favor for Brian and for me.
Well, we're going to be back out on the water pretty quick.
I'm looking forward to it.
I am too.
All righty, thank you very much. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you very much.